So, I was having some more thoughts. Now it all seems very disorganized in my mind, but in a way that's kind of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about thinking and how we make sense of our own experience to ourselves. I think really one of my objectives in making videos and talking in this way is to chart out a mental map and a sort of autobiographical sketch of myself. Just, as an exercise to make sense of my own experience, and potentially that might be of value to others. I don't know. It feels better putting it out. It's a good pretext to just reflect. Putting out a video for others. In any case, I was thinking about an experience I had at a friend's apartment when I was like 23. I made friends with this girl, and she gave me a key to her apartment to take care of her cat. And I decided one summer day, because I had no job and was fancy free, that I'd make chili. So I looked through her cabinets to find ingredients, and I was sort of cobbling together this chili, and it was going pretty well. And then I found this jar of cocoa powder, and somehow I had in my mind I could make it sort of this Cajun kind of gumbo. I was sort of thinking of the Caribbean or something, thinking like that would probably be an interesting ingredient, sort of like to add some sort of exotic tinge to this dish. So I unloaded some cocoa powder, because it's bitter. Cocoa powder, when it's not sugared, it's sort of bitter. I thought this would be an interesting twist on a traditional dish, and it just, it didn't really work. I tasted it, and it just tasted weird and kind of awful. So I thought, maybe I could fix this. What else could I add that would sort of balance the scales? And so I saw a jar of peanut butter. And so I scooped out some spoonfuls of peanut butter into the chili, and I stirred it up, and I had all this ground beef and oil and peanut butter and chocolate, and it was just totally disgusting. It was like a Reese's cup, a butter cup mixed with ground beef and onions. It was terrible. So I put it in the toilet, and it just looked like so much shit, and I flushed it down. That was the end of my chili experiment. My friend came home, and she saw me as I was doing this, and made fun of me for it. So that's, I don't know, that's a kind of metaphor for my life. I think I find myself doing things like that. I have brighter moments, I suppose. In my previous video, I was talking about Jerusalem and Athens, and using this example of a prison, the world as a prison. And Paul Talk suggested that instead you could see the world as a festival. And I was thinking about that this morning as I was driving along the interstate, and I just, seeing all these lights from across the way sparkle through the leafless tree line, and thinking, rather beautiful. And how my experience toggles back and forth from something beautiful to something sort of sinister and dreadful. And somehow I ended up thinking yet again of my experience as a 14-year-old. When I was 14, I took a substance called 2CE, which is a chemical analog of mescaline. And I sat transfixed looking at an ottoman for like 8 hours. It's a completely unreal experience. This ottoman. I was at my friend's house, and his mother was away, and she had this patterned fabric overlaying an ottoman. It's like a sort of a dark floral pattern, and it began to pulse at a rate of like, one full cycle per 8 seconds or something, where it would go through a whole range of morphing in a way that you could never depict even in a creative animation. If you did a frame-by-frame animation, there'd be no way to properly depict the changes that it went through, because it, even though it was changing, it's impossible to describe properly, but it was like it was real. It was truly what it was at every moment of its change. It was breathing, but you didn't get the sense at all that it was an unreal hallucination. It felt more like you were seeing it accurately for the first time. And in fact everything is always pulsing in this way. That material reality is not such a solid thing. Material reality is this living thing, that matter is alive with this sort of pulsing energy, and it's our dumb sense perception which doesn't see it. So I was having this sort of Aldous Huxley type of experience as a 14-year-old, and I think that was a defining moment in my life. The Chile thing was a defining moment, and this was also a defining moment. And there are a string of these defining moments that I might be able to call the constellations of my life. There's these fixed stars of experience which I'm trying to trace out constellations upon. So yeah, I don't know how any of this really relates, other than to the theme of me trying to speak in a relatively unfiltered way. And I think it's difficult when everyone has their defining experiences. Everyone's life is made up of a series of defining experiences. Our life is one continuous, like the ottoman. Our life is one continuous flow, but we can't represent it to ourselves like that. We have to. It has to, just like a drawing that depicts an object. We have to figure out what the lines are. What are the defining lines that really construct the form of our own experience to ourselves? And it's difficult, I think, when one's lines trespass in ways that trespass in such a way that it becomes difficult to to be open about those experiences, or to relate them to the body of your own experience and the experience of those around you. There have been several people I've known in my life who seem to have a kind of carefree, happy-go-lucky thing. Like they were born without a filter, without that sort of appendix, that part of yourself that feels shame, or that feels awkwardness or embarrassment. They're sort of these I don't know, sometimes they're kind of idiotic, these idiot savants. I think back to like from college, or I don't know, and sometimes it seems an enviable thing. And maybe I'm that way too. Just to some degree. It depends on who you're asking, I suppose. In any case, I was talking about Jerusalem and Athens in my last video, and I'll just try to relate all of this as well as I can in the next couple minutes, and then end this video. Because I was talking about this analogy of the prison. Paul Tuck said, well, why not a festival? And fair enough. But it occurred to me that really, I think the reason I chose the prison analogy and not a festival analogy is because I'm intrigued by the different ways you can regard death, the experience of dying, and what that holds for you in the future. So up until I was 25, I had a kind of loosey-goosey Protestant theology inherited from my parents, more or less. And there was a kind of a universalist tinge to it. I think even now my parents, if you asked them, theologically they don't really believe in a hell. They think that if people are really bad, the Hitlers, Mussolinis of the world just kind of, that their souls just kind of dissolve like gobstoppers in Mountain Dew, and just sort of evaporate into a cloud that is wisped away into an Everglade. I don't know. They certainly don't believe in eternal damnation, and one of the things that really changed when I converted to Catholicism was I began to believe. I believe now in hell. I think it exists. I think that the damned, the condemned souls go there, and it's an agonizing thing to contemplate, or to have as part of my worldview. And I'm glad that I believe in it, because I believe in it. I don't know if that's circular reasoning, or it might appear to be circular reasoning. That I'm glad I know it exists, because I would not want to be ignorant of such a reality. But I think my whole perception of the world really shifted. Another sort of defining moment where things shifted for me when I began to take on the weight of that, and take that idea seriously. And so when I think about this question of Jerusalem or Athens, or think about everything. Everything sort of goes through the prism in a way of this idea of heaven or hell, damnation or salvation. And so that's why I think of a prison, because world is something that we have to be saved from. We have to be elevated. We have to, or else we sink and we are damned. And that is, in a way, the most important thing. It has a more elevated status. Programming technology is seeping into my vocabulary now. I have a job now as a scripter, programmer. I'm dealing with an issue at work right now where I'm trying to run this script, but my privilege is not elevated enough. And I was having these dreams last night. I was thinking about changing my 2-year-old son, and because he's been sick and throwing up, and so you gotta wake up and change his pajamas, get him into fresh ones, change his sheets. And I was having these annoying dreams where I was thinking of changing my son as like changing the file name on a file in a directory. It's like, oh yeah, I don't know, these feverish dreams. Anyway, there's a question, and when you get into software, there's a question of open source versus proprietary software, and the question of authority, and what privilege level you are elevated to in a given programming context, sort of has a theological overtone. More analogies. Anyway, anon.